We are just going to start running you through this presentation, and this is also going to be recorded and this will be live on Facebook. But right now, since the live audience is a small one, so feel free to unmute yourself, stop us, make it conversational, introduce yourself. We'll be more than happy to discuss about the fellowship program with you. The way that we have planned today's day, this meeting, is that for the first half an hour, we'll take you through this presentation about our fellowship. Then for the next 15 to 20 minutes, we're going to spend some time answering any questions that you might have. As I said, even while we're presenting, if you have questions, feel free to stop us and ask your questions or make your comments. And then after that, we have a very scintillating discussion planned with Mr. Anil Swarup, who was the Education Secretary at the Government of India and who has also served as the Coal Secretary in India. So with that, I'd like to welcome everybody who's attending or seeing us live. Welcome to the Global Policy, Diplomacy and Sustainability Fellowships info session for the round 2. Just to begin with, let me share a quick idea about what this fellowship is about, who's the team behind it, etc., etc. So I am Arpit Chaturvedi. I'm the co-director of this fellowship. I also serve as a faculty member at the San Francisco State University, and I head an organization called Global Policy Insights, which is a centrist think tank which works on public policy, diplomacy, sustainability, things like that. And I've also co-founded another organization with Ishan, and this organization is called NVPOL, and we do a lot of interesting stuff on climate change, biodiversity, and things like that. I teach the comparative public administration course at the fellowship. Before we move forward, probably if Ishan could come in and just say hi, introduce himself.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see all of you. I know it's a small gathering and we're expecting more people to jump in, but I can already see that some of the people who are here are some of our applicants for this cohort. So welcome to all of you, and welcome to all those people who are joining us live on Facebook. I know that we're also going live on Facebook and we get tremendous audiences on Facebook as well. As Arpit mentioned, before I pass it back to Arpit, please feel free to jump in, have a conversation with us. The interview session, the fireside chat, only starts in about an hour. So till then, we can have a conversation and also through the conversation explain to you what we aspire to be with the fellowship and what we be with the fellowship. So both the aspects of what we can expect through the fellowship. Again, I'm Ishan Chaturvedi. I am the co-director of GPODS Fellowship, as Arpit mentioned. I am also an environmental lawyer by qualification. I hold a master's in environmental law and policy from Stanford Law School. I worked with the UN in the past, and now I am the assistant dean of Jindal School of Environment and Sustainability in India. I am also the co-founder of NVPOL with Arpit, who's here. But I think I would not be going too far if I say that the most cherished project which has got international acclaim within 3 months of it starting out is the GPODS Fellowship. And that is what we're here to discuss. And again, I welcome you all. And let's have a conversation about something that we hope can change everyone's life.
Thank you. Thank you, Ishan. So going back to what this fellowship is all about, if you see those 4 words written at the bottom of the slide over here: interact, immerse, involve, evolve. I think if someone were to summarize this fellowship, it could be summed up in these 4 words, because we really believe that the power of interaction, immersion, involvement leads to the evolution of humankind. We have seen that happen in the first cohort of our fellowship, which ran from October to December. A bunch of 30 vivacious fellows from all across the world got together with 40 mentors from 14 different countries. And what started as interactions on issues such as climate change, issues such as nuclear proliferation, issues such as the world getting a lot divided into echo chambers, into people who don't want to hear each other's opinions. All of those walls started breaking down when we started interacting with each other. And the idea behind this fellowship is that some of the challenges that we think that our world faces are related to public policy, diplomacy, and climate change. So if we are able to create a cohort of committed individuals across the world who can first interact with an open mind and discuss what are the issues around public policy, diplomacy, sustainability, and they can immerse themselves into collaborative projects and sharpen each other's mental models. That in itself is the trigger for innovation. That in itself is the trigger for us evolving into a better humankind. So that was the fundamental idea with these three tracks. Now, coming down to what this fellowship is about, again, as I said, it's about global policy, diplomacy, and sustainability. What we realized when we were designing this fellowship is that we need a network of people who can think globally and act locally. And what we realized was that a lot of times these discussions, they get tucked away into silos. So that's the reason why we thought that giving it a global flavor is important for the kind of problems that we are dealing with. Look at the things that we are dealing with right now. The coronavirus, it's not local anymore. What happens in one part of the world affects very really the lives of people living all across. And just something I won't call it simple, but then just something that we cannot even see by our naked eyes. The virus can really impact and shake the whole world from one corner to the other. So that thing in itself has implications about public policy, implications about international relations, and implications about sustainable development. And our idea was to offer cutting-edge courses, workshops, and lectures, seminars by accomplished individuals who are working at the forefront of these three disciplines to share their mental models and their worldview with our fellows. And that's where we are with the GPODS Fellowship. So over to the next slide, please, Aditi.
So one of the things before we get onto the specific differentiations of public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, especially for those of you who are planning to apply or who've applied and want to know what they should be looking forward to. This is something that I discuss often in my classes, in my lectures as well, but especially when it comes to GPODS, it's been one of the mainstays. That why is GPODS and why not a separate fellowship on sustainability and a different fellowship on diplomacy and a different fellowship on public policy? That is simply because as we head more and more into vocational super specializations, you realize that none of these are watertight compartments. These super specializations will flow from international relations. For example, if you take the Ethiopian dispute of that has been going on, it has implications of water diplomacy to it. So there's a sustainability angle to a war, almost a war that has been going on. There's a sustainability public policy angle to why a certain amount of water is required off the coast of China. So these are very malleable fields which have to feed into each other for you to become an expert in any of these fields or all of these fields. One. Secondly, when you are so there are two places where you could come from. You could be a graduate student or a young professional who already holds a degree in one of these fields and wants to become an expert in those fields. That is one target audience, so to say, who would be interested in GPODS fellowship. But what if you're a couple of years down your professional life and you already have, say, an expertise in international relations or diplomacy, as we call it, but you understand how important climate change and sustainability is going to be, or how important public administration and public affairs is going to be, that is where you want to diversify your skill set. And that's where you want to become an expert in each of these fields going forward. Another important aspect that I just wanted to mention here really quickly is that we get a lot of queries saying that I am a sustainability professional, or I am an IR professional, or I am a public policy professional, but I have absolutely zero background in any of the other fields. So would this be right for me? And to give my courses example, the global seminars, global commons and environment seminars course that I take during the fellowship, we start in the first lecture with the question, what is environment? That's ground zero at which we start. And our last lecture of the 20 lecture, 10 lecture series is risk assessment in climate change and modeling in climate change. So you can see the kind of length and breadth we cover from ground zero to the cutting edge conversations that are happening in each of these fields. So even if you're not an expert in any of these fields, please don't be intimidated by the fact that I don't know much about this field, so should I go ahead with it? Because the whole idea of this fellowship is to develop an understanding, inculcate a knowledge base for you to start from the scratch and then become an expert in the field.
So thank you, Ishan. And, just to build off of what Ishan said, we also have a very strong realization about how the real world works. In the real world, trust me, there are no public policy experts. There are no sustainability experts. There are no diplomacy experts, even though people may call themselves diplomats, even though people may call themselves legislators. The fact is that if you are dealing with real problems, you're going to be dealing with a bunch of these things and more. So our idea is that the more networked your knowledge building is, the more neurons get connected into your brain, and everyone builds knowledge on their, in their own way. If I'm attending a lecture, then the way that I will be building my set of knowledge, given my already existing set of ideas and information in my brain, would be extremely different than what you would be building up in your own brain. So what we want to create is a networked ecosystem of knowledge building, and that's what we're all about. So here we are with these 3 tracks, and you'll see a lot of threes in this fellowship. You have 3 tracks of public policy, diplomacy, and sustainability. And Aditi, if you could take us to the next slide. You have 3 courses. These 3 courses are comparative public administration. That's the course that I teach. I'll talk a little bit about that. We have a course in international diplomacy, and we have a course in, it's a seminar. And for those who are interested, we'll talk about what's the difference between a seminar and a course. But it's a course in global commons. So all of these things that we are dealing with, and Ishan will be able to talk about that a lot more. Public health or, clean air, all of these things are global commons, because whatever happens in one part of the world, it impacts the other, and it's a common resource pool that we're dealing with. So we have a seminar in global commons, which focuses on climate change and environment. So these are the 3 courses. These are graduate level courses, 20 hours each. And in designing each of these courses, what we did was that we studied the course syllabi of the top universities in the world who are at the cutting edge of the research in all of these 3 fields. So if we are talking about the comparative public administration course, we would have, examined the syllabi and the course structure of various universities, including Cornell, Columbia, Berkeley, Stanford. And after distilling through all of these syllabi, we have created a course which is 20-hour long, digestible, and something that would really change the way that you look at things. in that particular domain. Then in addition to that, we have 5 workshops. And similarly, for these workshops, what we did was that Ishan and I, we were at the World Economic Forum last year when, that meeting used to happen in person. And we talked to a number of people. Even later, we conducted a number of focus group discussions with people in the corporates, people in the government, people in civil society, to understand that what are the skills that would be needed for leaders in the future. So it doesn't matter whether you're working in the public policy space, in the corporates, if you're a diplomat, if you're working on ground for a sustainability initiative, you will need some skills that a lot of people think are valuable, and people are experiencing already a paucity of such skills in the market. And these skills range from systems thinking. So how do you learn about various stakeholders, their interests? How do you understand that how one particular system is connected with other, how geopolitics is connected to healthcare and stuff like that? So that's systems thinking for you. Then policy writing and communication, and that's also a course that I partially teach. I developed that course while teaching at the Indian School of Public Policy, and during my role as the editor-in-chief of the Cornell Policy Review. So essential to any sort of success, depending on, irrespective of which career stream you're in, is your ability to pen down your ideas with clarity and communicate those to a large set of audience and to the right audience. So that's what we cover in the policy writing and communication lab. We have other courses such as on circular economy. So if you're working in the field of sustainability, that becomes a really important thing. And even otherwise, as the old models of economics are becoming obsolete, it's important to understand how circular economy works. And we have a workshop on that. And then we have a number of workshops on dealing with case studies with public policy, where we give you really, really hard case studies. I'm joking. They're not so hard when you actually get to it, but then we give you case studies which require a lot of data analysis, which require a lot of systems thinking, which require, all of this knowledge that you're building. But then it gives you practice to work with groups, to negotiate, and to come up to a solution to various problems, such as the, water scarcity in Mexico City, or how do you build toilets for the underprivileged in New Delhi. So a battery of case studies just to give you more practice on, some of these things that we are learning in the fellowship. And finally, a workshop in fundraising, because no matter what field you're in, that's one skill that would be beneficial for you, irrespective of whether you're in the government, in the corporate sector, or in the NGO. So that too becomes a solid pillar of our workshops. Over to the next slide, please. Right. Thank you. So, yeah, I think I've talked about the workshops. Ishan, do you want to talk about the mentorship component?
I was just going to say, so as we were discussing right at the beginning, what was the idea behind the GPODS fellowship? Now, from personal experience, and I'm sure all those attending would relate to this as well, there are two things that are needed when you start your journey, or that there are two differences between an 18 or a 25-year-old professional and a 45, 50-year-old professional. One is obviously the first-hand experience that you gain, the knowledge that you gain by working on problems as you go along life and your professional career, which is where the knowledge base of public policy, CPA, comparative public administration, or international relations, or sustainability and global commons comes in. But what about the second difference between a 25-year-old young professional and a 45-year-old experienced professional? The second point of difference is the network that you make. So over the next 20 years or 30 years of your vocational life, you'll realize that the most important, one of the most important things in your professional career is knowing the right people, speaking with the right people. And it takes 20, 30 years just to get a network going. So this is something that we want to fuse in our fellowship. So as you know, as has been advertised and Arpit has already mentioned, we have 40 plus mentors who are industry leaders. You talk of any major global organization or industry, and that is represented as a mentor through a mentor in this fellowship, whether that's the United Nations, uh, consultancies, major consultancies of the world. We have someone who was the head of Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation earlier, and we'll go through the mentors separately as well. But what is mentorship? Because mentorship is not just arranging guest lectures. Yes, we have guest lectures by these mentors when they teach you about their experiences and their professions and their academic experiences. But there's more to mentorship, because otherwise it would have just been guest lectures. It becomes mentorship because each of these mentors, the people from the United Nations, people from GIZ, people from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, they not just talk about their experiences and conduct a lecture on their experiences, but they sit with you privately in what we call the interactive office hours. And they discuss with you a non-agenda talk. So if they're sitting with someone in this group, if I take one of yours example, for example, Tio's example, and Tio has an office hour lined up with Stefano Bulci, for example, who's the head of International Water Law Association. Theo has the opportunity to then ask him, listen, I want to join this organization. How do I go about it? Or this is where I want to see myself in 20 years. How should I build my career? Or I want to pursue a PhD in such and such course from Yale University. How should I go about it? So just the opportunity to interact with one of the biggest names around the globe in their expert field is what lends mentorship, the mentorship to guest lectures. And that's the whole idea of providing mentors. Another thing that and as you might have noticed, it's global policy diplomacy and sustainability fellowship. So we make an extra effort to include mentors from all across the globe. We have 14 more than 14 countries represented, various continents. Mentors are coming from various backgrounds, and that also gives our fellows the opportunity to develop their networks through these mentors in various countries, various professional fields and academic fields, and so on. So those are the important aspects of mentorship that we always want to specify when we're discussing about the fellowship. Now, since we're talking about the mentors, we'll just quickly go through some of the mentors that we have. We have the chairwoman of GIZ. For those of you who are from either an environment background or from Europe, you must have heard of this. We have Fernando Pena, who is the Director of Government Relations at Jackson Vaughan Public Strategies. We have Professor Christina Voigt of the University of Oslo. She's also the head of Climate Change Task Force of International Union for Conservation of Nature, and one of the people who actually drafted the Paris Agreement, the COP21 Paris Agreement. We have entrepreneurs like Dr. Ravi Mariwala of the Marico fame and a water scientist himself. We have Elizabeth Prima, who till very recently was the head of Environmental Law Division of United Nations. She has just become the executive secretary of one of the most important international organizations, which is the Convention on Biological Diversity. We have Professor David Tipping, who is an international expert in water and water management, sustainable development, disaster management, disaster recovery. We have Mr. Dr. Sanjay Baru, who is the director of geoeconomics and strategy, delves into public policy quite a lot, even international relations. We also have Justice Sabrina McKenna, who is a sitting judge of the Supreme Court of Hawaii and an expert in law generally, but also environment per se. So as you can see, we have experts from all across the globe. Arpit, do you want to take over?
Sure. Here we have some experts in the international security field, such as you have Dr. Bastian Geigrich, who is the director of the Defense and Military Analysis and International Institute of Strategic Studies. We also have another academic, Professor Katarzyna Pisarka. And Katarzyna is the founder of a very interesting diplomacy academy at Warsaw, which is called the European Academy of Diplomacy. And this is a place where a lot of young diplomats are being trained, not only from Poland, but from all across the world. Again, we have Lawrence Perenza, who's an accomplished diplomat, very active in the NATO circles. She's the director of the Transatlantic Defense and Security Center for European Policy Analysis, or SEPA. And we have Professor Oliver Ruppel. And Professor Ruppel is, he teaches at the Stellenbosch University in South Africa, and he's an expert in international law and a director of the Development and Rule of Law program, which is called DROP. So in addition to them, we have in total 40 plus mentors this time, coming from 14 plus countries. Yes, thank you so much, Aditi. So you can see, a lot many mentors lined up over here. What you can do is go to our website, and we have a whole page dedicated to mentors in the menu section. And you can look at each of these mentors' profiles. And if you're planning to apply, you can let us know in particular which mentor would you be most interested in learning from, and we'll make special efforts to put you individually in touch with those mentors as well. So coming back to what our fellowship has been all about. So these have been our mentors. They also offer interactive office hours, what Ishan mentioned already, which means that you'll be able to sit with them either individually or in small groups and discuss with them about life, about your career, about their experiences, about a particular opportunity or a project that you're working on. So this gives you a no agenda space with your mentors, where you can just develop rapport, have a good time, and build that solid relationship, which would not only give you a great perspective, but then will help you advance through your career. And a lot of studies say that successful careers are built on solid networks. So that's what you have over here. Aditi, moving forward, we are also extremely lucky, and this is what we cannot emphasize this enough. We are extremely lucky to have gotten a first solid group of fellows in our first cohort. And we have had people like Ria Narayanan, Caroline, Saeed, Ria, an MBA from the Syed Business School, Oxford University, Caroline, an anthropologist from Harvard. Saeed is a postdoc fellow, a water expert. So we can share with you this list of our fellows. All of them have become great friends of ours, and we have developed such close relations with them. We have learned from them over these past 3 months. I was seeing people like Shashank in there, who's ex-Indian Air Force. He's a graduate of the Harvard Kennedy School and is now working as a grassroots politician. I cannot think that our fellowship would be what we are just with us and the mentors. It is the fellows that make who we are as a fellowship, and we will be happy to put you in touch with with some of our fellows who were there in the first cohort, and you can hear from them directly. I think in addition to these courses, to these mentorship lectures, etc., what really is the value of this fellowship is that you have people who are as committed as you are to some of these causes that we care about, and they are working on it in their own way. They meet up in virtual cafes, what we call as, these are 24/7 open Zoom sessions where anybody could join in and talk to another fellow. Our fellows also interact on WhatsApp groups, on a Slack channel. They conduct virtual parties. They hang out even outside of this virtual world, and they have built strong friendships and connections with each other. And I think that is the real value of being in a cohort like this. So
So
yeah.
I think to add to what Arpit was saying, and for those of you interested, we've already mentioned what GPODS is about, and obviously you'll see a lot more about GPODS on our website. Aditi will share the links in the chat box as well. But now I want you to think about on a micro level, which is where you come, you increase your knowledge base, you become experts in public policy, sustainability, and diplomacy. You have networks with the best mentors and global leaders from around the world, as you can see on your screen, including Supreme Court judges, legislators, foundational experts, professors, and such. But there's also one additional factor that you cannot underrate or undersell, which is the bonding, the intra cohort bonding, and inter cohort bonding, if I may, which
Yeah.
is you are a part of a very, very special hand-picked group of 30 to 40 fellows from across the world who are driven towards, who is driven towards these three goals. You share now your professional network with only 29 or 39 other fellows from the globe who are so well connected as you are. You have a very significant set of experiences that you bring to the table to the fellowship, which you share on what we call the virtual cafe, which is a non-academic cafe where you, if you're free and you want to hang out with other fellows of the GPODS fellowship, you just turn on your camera and you just hang out with them, discuss your projects that you're working on, or just have a drink and chill for a little while. But what is happening during those 3 months of these virtual cafes, of lectures, of interactions, of game nights, of drinking nights is that you're breaking the ice between yourself and someone who's sitting a couple of continents away from you, and just gelling with them, networking with them. These are people of your age, or these are people not of your age, and you're getting to know them. You probably by the end of your fellowship have places to crash in different cities because of the bonds that you've made during the fellowship with these driven individuals. And again, uh, it is such a special group of, I use the word handpicked again, handpicked leaders, which you can be a part of. And you become a part of this and you share that network with 30 or 40 other people. And as you become a part of it, you'll realize that you've become a part of the GPODS family. And with every cohort, your immersion, your inclusion only gets better, and you'll feel more and more connected to this family. So one cannot take away the interpersonal side of such a fellowship, that you have not just gained professionally, but also personally in the kind of friends that you make through this fellowship over the years. So that's one thing. Uh, I would also want to talk a little about our uh, partners. So as we mentioned, Envipol is an environmental consultancy which tries to bridge the gap between sustainable development and environmental equity. We have GPI, which is a centrist think tank which works on policy issues from around the globe. We have IUCN. Any of you who are environmental professionals must have heard of IUCN. It's the biggest international organization of environmental professionals. We have Global Young Leaders Academy and the ANCSSC, which is a South-South cooperation organization led by the United Nations in some conferences. So we have so many diverse organizations who are partnering with us, who are feeding information, knowledge, mentors through this fellowship, and trying to make the 3 months of your GPODS journey as smooth and as easy for you to grasp as possible. And that being said, I think we're at the end of our presentation. I would invite you to follow us on social media, contact us directly. Arpit and my email ID is available online on the GPODS website. And we're obviously available 24/7 if anyone wants to contact us on LinkedIn or Facebook. So that's the GPODS fellowship, guys. As we've opened the chat box, and I would be happy to take any questions that you might have. And if you do not have any questions, we have also been joined by a couple of our past fellows who are too shy to turn on their videos. So we can obviously converse with them as we've done over the past 3 months. But hi, Aman. But one of the things that I invite all of you to notice and think about is that whatever you're doing as of now is not the end of it all. It is not the dimension that you have to succeed in. You can always explore more dimensions outside your comfort zone. In fact, if you follow our social media, one of the posts that we have circulated is that GPODS brings you outside your comfort zone of your specialty or expertise, and that's what we intend to do with all of you going forward through this GPODS fellowship. Uh, Now, a couple of questions that we usually get when it comes to the fellowship. First of all, what are the passing requirements? And as Aman would second while I talk about this, one thing that we require of our fellows at the end of the 3 months is a capstone project. Now, those of you who are joining us from the West, you already know about the capstone project. But capstone project is basically a 5 to 7 page amalgamation of everything that you've learned during the fellowship, or any of the conversations that have piqued your interest and you want to write on. But the whole idea is that by the end of the fellowship, you should have a publishable product that can be then published, circulated, and it lends to your profile further. So we don't want you to just go away with the knowledge base, but actually give more to the world with your expertise that you might have developed over the next 3 months. So that's the passing requirement. The other requirement that we really encourage in our fellows is interaction. As you saw on the first slide of this discussion itself, a lot of our concentration is towards mentor fellow interaction, intra fellow interaction, fellow lecturer interaction. So we really invite you to discuss and interact with everyone that you meet during the GPODS fellowship, including myself. And all of us are almost always available for all of you. So if there's any professional academic conversation that you need to have, or if there are any questions that you have about a particular professional pursuit or a lecture that's been conducted, please always do feel free to join in the discussion, as I invite you for joining us in this discussion today. So with that, again, if there are any questions, I understand that Ganesha has a question. Hi, Ganesha, nice to see you here. Arpit, do you want to take it up?
Sure. Hi, Ganesha. Good to see you here. And that's a good question that you've asked, that how many working hours are required to be allotted for the fellowship. So typically, depending on the week that we're in, the stage that you're in the fellowship, you have 8 to 12 hours of working hours required for the fellowship. Most of our fellows, and this is one thing that I think I should tell you, most of our fellows have been either full-time working professionals or full-time students who have a lot of working hours already committed throughout the week. So the way that we structure our fellowship engagement is that we try to make it weekend heavy, so that you can leave your regular day-to-day work during the weekdays, and at the weekend focus more on the fellowship. We also plan it in a manner that if especially you're in the Indian subcontinent, even if we are having some lectures during the weekdays, we have it after your usual office hours. So typically what you'd see is a lecture organized around 7:30 p.m. by Indian Standard Time. And that also works out for our fellows who are in Europe and the US, because it's daytime for them. And if given enough notice, and the moment you join the fellowship, you'll see a whole calendar laid out for you for the next 3 months, and you'll be able to see and plan your schedule around it. our fellows, I can see already a few of them. Aman is here. So they can tell you that typically the way it works is that, if after you've done your work in the evening, you sit, you meet your friends and you meet your fellows. And in fact, after a while, what we started getting from our fellows is that we should organize, if we are not having a lecture in the evening, we should organize something else, maybe a happy hour or maybe something. So what you'll realize is that you'd want to spend more and more time with the fellows, with the mentors. The mentors also jump into some of these fun sessions in addition to the mentor lectures or the courses. So that's what we typically have, 8 to 12 hours in a week.
So another important point there, Ganesha, and again, like I really appreciate the question because we do get this question a lot. As Arpit mentioned, juggling between the fellowship and your professional career, professional life, or your student life is not difficult because it's not juggling in the first place. It's conducive to all the working professionals and academic students as well. But another thing, just in case, because you cannot really account for your preoccupation on that specific day, something might come up, you might have it in your calendar, but you might have to go somewhere or attend to something. For that, we also provide for asynchronous learning, which basically means that every lecture, and I mean the 60-hour lectures of the courses and every mentor lecture and office hour not usually, but if there are people who want it recorded as well, everything is recorded for your later viewing. So even if you've gone out while the live lecture is playing out, even though we wish that you do attend all the live lectures because it adds to the interaction and discussion, even if you're not available for the live lecture, you can always go back to your classroom, Google Classroom, and check out the recordings for that lecture, ask your fellows about what was discussed, and take a lot out of even not having attended the live lecture that was conducted specifically for you.
And then, in addition to that, it also depends on, what are the extra opportunities you want to take up associated with the fellowship. Because this time around, our fellows spoke at a number of venues, including the UN Habitat. They talked about, reimagining cities across the world in an event with UN Habitat. Our fellows also virtually led a panel in the New York Climate Week and at the International Dialogue on Migration. So these are some of the, if I may say, co-curricular things that come in addition to the fellowship. So if you want to take those up, we also provide those opportunities, but then that definitely means, planning your schedule accordingly. So, yeah. Any other questions?
I think that's about it, but also because we are getting a lot of traction from Facebook, it seems. Maybe we can answer some questions later on Facebook by way of direct messages to the people who've picked up some questions. Also about the application process, because I understand that that's also a bit of a worried time for all of you. Anyone who applies wants to understand how it works. So we require you to submit a resume, which the shorter it is, the better. But I understand that some of our fellows, including Aman here, are quite the achievers. So they have longer CVs, which is absolutely okay. So we require a resume. We require a statement of purpose, which is where you tell us why you want to pursue this fellowship. Because you must understand that we get interest from all across the globe and a lot of traction in the international conversations about. We were recently, in fact, for those of you who do not know, nominated for SDG Sustainable Development Goals Awards by the United Nations. So we get a lot of interest, and we want you to tell us in your SOP as to why you want to pursue this fellowship. Apart from resume and SOP, which are compulsory documents that you need to submit, you have the option of submitting letters of recommendations. You have the options of submitting writing samples or any other document that you think might help your chances with the fellowship. Usually, once you've submitted these documents and paid the application fees on PayPal, the link is provided on the website. We take about 5 to 7 days to get back to you with a decision on your fellowship application. We try and make it, we'll try and reply sooner, but sometimes it becomes difficult with the kind of traction that we're getting with the applications. But usually 7 days is the limit by which we get back to you on your application decision. It always helps, almost always, and I know it's intuitive, but I'll just specify anyway. It helps the earlier you apply, the easier it is for us to get back to you, because we have lesser applications to go through. Our selection committee, even though it works quite heavy hours, would go through each application, and if the quantum of applications is lesser, you'll have better chances of hearing back from us. Also, I just want to quickly address the issue of scholarship as well, because that's also a question we get pretty often. Now, we do offer scholarships, but scholarships are absolutely merit-based. They have a certain range, which we can discuss on email if you have any questions. And I'll also put down my email ID in the chat box if someone wants to get in touch with me directly, or Arpit could do that. But the point is that we also provide for scholarships, and we do hope that you take away something that's a lot more meaningful to you through this fellowship, and not just the academic experiences and professional experiences, but also the bonds that you create with your fellows and with the past fellows, since we have some of the past fellows here already. So that being said, I think what we'll do, as Aditi has announced in the waiting room already, we're going to take a 10-minute break and reconvene in 10 minutes, which is 4 p.m. Indian Standard Time, 5:30 p.m. for the folks on the East Coast. Good morning to you all, if any of you are joining us, and 11:30 a.m. in Europe. So that's what we'll do. I hope that you guys do stay on. We'll just put everyone in the waiting room for 10 minutes till Mr. Swarup gets here. And then we'll have a very engaging discussion on diplomacy, bureaucracy, public policy, sustainability, and on one of his books, which is an extremely interesting read. So that's what we're looking forward to. As we speak, I'm putting down my email ID in the chat box. You can always reach out to me and ask me about the fellowship or any other doubts that you might have. And let's hope that we keep the conversation going.
Yeah, I'm going to put down mine as well.
Okay. Arpit, ye to theek thaak ho. Oh, we live on Facebook and.
Yeah, Aditi, just keep a lookout on Mr. Swarup when he joins in.
Yeah.
All right, so Aditi, I think we can just admit everybody in and start the recording. All right. Hello, everyone from wherever you have joined us from. If you're in India, good evening. If you're joining us from Europe, good afternoon. If you're in the US, good morning. Thank you for joining us in this new year. Happy 2021. We've been through a tough year, and I'm really glad to seeing all of you over here. I'm extremely privileged to have been joined by Mr. Anil Swarup, who will be talking about his book. But let me introduce Mr. Swarup first. He's an author, a retired Indian Administrative Service officer of the Uttar Pradesh cadre, that's the state where I belong, where I hail from. He has 38 years of experience as a civil servant. He has served in various positions, both at the Union Government of India and the Government of Uttar Pradesh. He was one of the most celebrated education secretaries of India. He was also the coal secretary in India and an additional secretary at the Cabinet Secretariat, additional secretary of Labor and Empowerment, export commissioner in the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of India, and has also served as the district magistrate of Lakhimpur Kheri during the Babri Masjid Ram Janmabhoomi agitation under the then Chief Minister Kalyan Singh. Thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time to join us and for engaging us in this discussion about your upcoming, of your newly released book, The Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. Welcome to the GPODS Fellowship discussion.
Hello, a very happy new year to all of you, and thank you for inviting me here. Look forward to this interaction.
Thank you so much, sir. And today, as I said, we'll be talking about Mr. Swarup's latest book called The Ethical Dilemmas of a Civil Servant. A fascinating book, Mr. Swarup, and I have to compliment you on the Shero Shairi and those little couplets that you've used every here and there in the book. It gives it a truly Indian flavor. And at the same time, I think that this is a book that can be read by somebody who's in any part of the world, because bureaucracy, as you've also rightly mentioned in the book, exists in all sorts of systems, whether you're an adherent to Marxism or to capitalism or whichever sort of a country that you're living in. All of these countries are being run by bureaucrats. The state has not gone anywhere, and the bureaucrats have stayed with it. But coming back to one of the core tenets of your book, I saw this one line that has really intrigued me, and I need to tell you that I was reading it on my Kindle, and I saw Kindle tells you the number of people who have highlighted that particular line. And I can tell you that over 100 people have highlighted this line. To be precise, 159 people, where you say honesty is necessary and not sufficient for the welfare of the people. Could you talk a little bit more about this particular statement that you've made in the book?
I'm glad you picked up this line from the book. To me, it is seminal in the sense that a large number of civil servants are indeed honest, contrary to the general view. I cannot really say that all those honest officers are doing what they want to. And the basic reason why I mentioned here is that a large number of us, or them now I can say, get away with being only honest. My take is a bit different. My take is that a civil servant being honest is a necessary condition, but not a sufficient condition for him to serve the people of the country. He's paid not merely to be honest, he's paid to perform on the ground. I have come across a large number of civil servants who are so obsessed with honesty that they stop taking decisions. And that's pretty tragic, because not taking a decision is being intellectually dishonest. It's being wrong, because if you don't take decisions, then things don't get done on the ground. And one of the criticisms of the civil service in general, and appropriate also, is that there are a number of policies, but they don't get implemented. And implementation requires decisions on the spot. And unfortunately, we have started celebrating such officers who are only honest. In fact, quite a few of them carry this medallion of transfers, number of transfers that they've had. I've often wondered, is that is the basis on which a person should be evaluated, an officer should be evaluated? I repeat by saying that honesty is absolutely imperative and necessity. But being just honest doesn't help anybody. You have to perform on the ground. The common man is certainly harassed if you are dishonest, but merely being honest, his purpose doesn't get served. He wants his work done. He wants to get things moving. He wants delivery on the ground. So apart from being honest, I've always believed an officer needs to perform on the ground. And that's what it means.
Do you think that this tendency of wearing these medallions of how many times one has been transferred stems somewhere from the fact that civil servants are not duly recognized by the people for the work that they do? I remember in one of your lines, you say that, and you've quoted it with a Hindi shairi that I cannot probably rephrase to the sophistication to which you could, but then you've said that they are like the bedrocks on which the foundations on which the buildings are built. So the civil servants are not really the people who are visible out there in the open. So do you think that there's this hunger in the civil servants, for good or bad reason, for being recognized for the work that they're doing?
The couplet is दिखाई कम दिया करते हैं बुनियाद के पत्थर, ज़मीन में दब गए जो इमारत उन्हीं पे कायम है. This is actually the recognition of a civil servant who's invisible by and large and does his job. But this is in the context of those that are observing the civil servant. My book is more about an address to the civil servant. Let's understand this context very clearly. When I talk to the civil servant, I talk about him in the sense of, given the set of circumstances, given the difficulties that he has to work in, he has to perform. And this inspiration he has to get from those that have performed in these difficult set of circumstances. So my address to the civil servant is, the choice is his. He has to see where he wants to see. If he looks at people who are non-performers, dishonest, then he is likely to become non-performer and maybe not be dishonest. But if he looks at people who are honest and have survived and thrived and have done well, and I've taken a number of names in my book where such officers have done brilliantly. But unfortunately, some of us don't look at officers who perform and look at officers who have failed and then say honesty has failed. It's wrong. When you talk of Julius Ribeiro, okay, when you talk of T.N. Session, when you talk of these people, who are we referring to? These are civil servants who have performed in these very set of circumstances. But if we look at officers who've been dishonest, who've gone behind the bars, then obviously we'll believe that all officers. So this is an address to those officers. Now, to an outsider, I'm beseeching them. And my entreaty to them is, please appreciate the good work. Because by appreciating good work, you'll be able to induce others, the fence sitters, to do good work. Now, if you keep condemning the bureaucracy, lock, stock, and barrel, then people will say, whether I work or not, I'm going to be condemned, I won't do it. So these are two separate sets of people I'm addressing. One, I am telling the officer to perform irrespective of the circumstances. The other, I am addressing people looking at the civil service and trying to tell them there are a large number of officers who've done well. So why don't you appreciate that work? I mean, you should be critical of what's going wrong, but by not appreciating, you are not imparting value to good work. And if a bureaucrat does not perceive value in doing good work, unless he's driven from inside, he will not be able to do good work. So there are two separate sets of people I'm addressing, and that's how I try and bring them together.
Absolutely, and I think this book has done a lot in bringing that together. And I'm happy to tell this to the audience that this message is not restricted to the book. Mr. Swarup has recently started a movement called the Nexus of Good, and I'd let Mr. Swarup talk a lot about how this movement helps foster this sort of a partnership, not only amongst the civil servants, but between the civil servants and the civil society at large, and celebrates the good models that we have for other people to recognize and to learn from. So if you could talk a little bit about the Nexus of Good movement, sir.
This whole idea of Nexus of Good came when I became Secretary Education, Government of India. And I was a bit, surprised, shocked at the manner in which it was being presented that the nation wants to know only negativity. The world has either collapsed or is about to collapse. So I thought, can't we think of an alternative narrative where some positive things could also be discussed? And this got reinforced as I traveled through the country in my capacity as school education. I visited 24 states and went deep into areas like Bastar, Sukma, drove from Pune to Goa, dropped down on the way to look at the schools, drove from Srinagar to Leh, not taking the national highway, going deep inside mountains to understand what was right or wrong with school education. And what I found was absolutely amazing. Some wonderful, wonderful work was being done, which was known in Delhi. Actually, unfortunately, in Delhi, we keep all wisdom reside here, very wrongly so. But I saw this wisdom all over the country. And I can narrate many incidents, some of which are there in my book. But I discovered wonderful work being done. So I thought, if I propagate that work a bit, can it help? It helped. And in one instance, which is there in my chapter of my book, where I explain how I visited a government primary school in a very interior area, I found that teacher extremely motivated, and his motivation got to be recognized locally. And then I brought him over to Delhi. He met the President of India. It got recognized there. And that model of Pastepada in a remote village has now been replicated in more than 50,000 schools of Maharashtra. So that was the power of positivity. That was the power of propagating good work. Why? The reason was very simple. Large number of people think that good cannot be done because they don't see it being done. Now, if I present before them good work that is being done, then they will start believing that good can be done because it is being done. That's the fundamental emphasis regarding Nexus Good. The second important point is that we in the government almost always curse the private sector, calling them, profiteering and this and that. Or everyone in the private sector feels that everyone is corrupt in the government. Both are equally wrong. In fact, there are brilliant people in the public sector. There are bright people in the private sector. I tried to propose this, and it succeeded to a certain extent, that why can't there be public-private partnership? Why can't good of the public can meet the good of the private? If all the rascals and ruffians of this society can come together and make life difficult for us, why can't good people come together? And that was where Nexus of Good was born. I'm glad to say that the foundation, we set up a foundation, is doing very well. Hundreds of people have joined this movement, and it's doing very well. People are started to believe that good can happen as they see hundreds of stories on the portal that good is being done. So that's what Nexus of Good is all about.
And thank you so much. I have personally attended a few sessions of Nexus of Good that take place in New Delhi. And I'm glad that now you've opened chapters all across the country so that the knowledge that resides outside of Delhi is also seen. So thank you so much for that. I wanted to understand, coming again to this whole issue of positive stories not being celebrated enough, and so much negativity that is there towards the government, towards the civil servant. And typically, as you say that, as you've also mentioned in the book, that, a lot of people just perceive the government to be inefficient and corrupt. And at one point, you draw a distinction between two types of civil servants. One is the dishonest, efficient, and pliable. And those are the ones that tend to do very well. And the other ones are honest, inefficient, and not pliable. So would you want to talk a little bit about that?
This relates to the first point that you asked me, was the first question that you asked me. In terms of dishonest, efficient, or honest, inefficient, there are various combinations that you can think of. Mm-hmm. I mean, there is an episode given in my book wherein I say that a dishonest officer cannot afford to be inefficient. Because if he is, then he'll be behind the bars. The guys have to be efficient. So that's one. The other is, as far as honesty is concerned, my take is that the officer should clearly understand the difference between being accommodative to the politician and being totally head over heels, totally giving up. There's a difference between the two. So that subtle difference has to be understood. We have to understand that politician also works in a context. When I joined the civil service, I had this opinion, as most of us has, that all wrong in the country is because of politics. Right. And very soon I realized it's absolutely wrong, because politicians also exist in this society as we. So there are as many good, bad, and ugly politicians as there would be people in the society or in the bureaucracy. Because both bureaucracy and the politicians emerge from this society. They're not coming out from somewhere else, from Timbuktu. So hence, they carry with them those values of good, bad, or ugly. Now, having understood that, if you start understanding the limitation within which the politics works, then you can get a lot of things done. So I remember distinctly in my career of 38 years, almost 95, 96% times I used to convince the politician to what I wanted him to understand. But there were 4-5% cases where he did not agree with me, but that's how democracy is. Ultimate decision maker is the politician. So you have to accommodate. You can't say that I am the repository of all wisdom. I have got into the IS and everybody else is wrong. This is absurd. We must appreciate that politician has his constituency. Now, the difference is very simple. If a politician is asking you to do anything illegal, then you should say no. There is no compromise. But there is a huge amount of gray area where the law does not say no. In that sense, it's the job of the bureaucrat to see where he can accommodate the politician. Now, that's where the whole play is. You know, a large number of officers who claim to be honest, or probably are honest, feel that what they say is the ultimate truth, and they end up fighting with every politician. I also had my fights with the politicians. But I had the occasion to work with brilliant, excellent politicians like Kalyan Singh, like Mallikarjun Kharge, like Prakash Javadekar, and they belong to different political parties. You know, outstanding politicians. I enjoyed working there. But there were others, one of whom was known as 25%. There's a chapter in my book, not naming that politician, but he's there. So you have, and there was a particular tax named after a particular minister. So you have all sorts of politicians going there. Now, the task here is to see how to get the best out of it. You know, management is art of the possible. It's not that management is not what I tell you to do it. That's not management. That's where I think some of us falter, especially the honest ones. They think that except them, the world is honest. And except them, the world is collapsing. So they become crusaders. So my advice to them is, why we join the civil service? Pick up a jhadu and become a politician. That would be a better role for you. Rather than sitting here in the civil service, cursing yourself, cursing everyone else, and doing nothing. So you don't have to compromise. You know, the difference has to be between accommodation and compromise. You don't have to compromise. But accommodation has to be there in husband and wife, brother and brother. It's a way of life. So don't think that if you yield an inch to the politicians, suddenly all hell will be paid. That's wrong. That's a wrong way of looking at it. We must understand. And as I said, I never had such a problem. With few politicians I did. But to say that I had problems with all politicians, absurd. I had some problem with politicians. In a particular case, a particular politician transferred me 3 times in 3 months. So be it. The moment they got to know that transfer does not impact me at all, they stopped. The problem is that we think transfer is a punishment, which is absurd. You know, in one of the instances which I mentioned in my book, I say, when my chief secretary is very upset because I was trying to defend a junior officer, and in defending that, the chief minister transferred me. So I went on to explain to him, sir, why are you bothered? Transfer is like death for us. It has to happen. Why do you worry about it? And if you believe in Hindu philosophy, you will be born again. You will be posted somewhere else. So if you're going to be reborn, why hassle about it? Let him have the pleasure of transferring it if he feels good about it. Now, once the minister knows or the politician knows that you are not impacted by transfer, you stop transferring. I had very stable stints. I was Director General Labour Welfare in government for 7 years, probably the longest. And I had a number of ministers too. So I think, we can continue to blame others. My book concludes by this couplet. खुदी को कर बुलंद इतना कि हर तकदीर से पहले खुदा बंदे से कुछ पूछे बता तेरी रजा क्या है. It is incumbent on the officer himself. And I have said that in my book. You can't do a nut to anybody else, but you can do a lot to yourself. If you can evolve as an individual to be reckoned with, I think politicians will not bother.
Thank you so much. And, given the limited amount of time that we have, I'm just going to ask you 2 more questions, which have been lingering on my mind for quite some time. And you've opened up, the discussion talking about the relationship between the politicians and the civil servants. And that's a good segue into these 2 questions, and we can take them one by one. Number one is, in many other countries, in developed countries, including the United States, you have this system of politicians picking civil servants. So you do not have the kind of stable cadre of civil servants as we have over here, except for a few specialized agencies. A lot of research also says that, that system turns out to be more efficient and open because you can get technocrats, you can get people from the private sector, etc., into the civil services. On the other hand, in India, we have had the steel frame sort of a system. Do you think that eventually we should be moving towards a more open civil service system, or do you think that for Indian conditions, what we have is probably the way it should be?
I'm of the view that Indian context is totally different from the American context. We can't compare the two. In fact, each country has its own context and you have to evolve accordingly. And India would require whatever is left of the steel frame, because but for the steel frame, we would have been clearly in trouble. Look at the countries who did not take care of the steel frame in the subcontinent and what happened to them. Look at what happened to Pakistan. Pakistan virtually destroyed the civil service, make it subservient to the army, and look at where Pakistan is. Look at what has happened in Bangladesh. So I would believe that given the context of this country, civil service will play an important role. However, there is a chapter in my book where I talk in terms of the evolution of the civil service, how it needs to be redone. You know, my point there is very simple. I say that right now, there is no better agency than UPSC to select the civil service. But what it does, it selects brilliant and bright individuals. In that chapter, I talk about selecting leaders. Now, today we have tools to select such leaders. But unfortunately, the whole process of selection is such that you don't select leaders, you select people who can write brilliantly in those 3 hours. Now, that's one. The second, when you train the civil servants, as they do in the academy, and I go there quite regularly, you don't train them as leaders. You train them, again, you further hone their individual brilliance. So they evolve with brilliant individually, some of them as brilliant poets and writers and actors and players, sportsmen. They're all brilliant individuals. But I'm not very sure. There are exceptions who evolve as leaders, but they do it on their own. There is no conscious effort either to select leaders or to hone their leadership skills. So what really needs to be done is not talk in terms of total change, where you have the spoil system as there is in the US. I think what is required is start selecting the right people, start training them appropriately, start mentoring them appropriately. There's a whole lot of things that can be done, and they're not very difficult to do. But if you try and bring in the spoil system, I think we'll all get spoiled. India is a different context. You try and do that in India. You get the way people come from the private domain here and the way it's a totally different system. They've tried with lateral entry, many of them have walked off already from what they thought. It doesn't work that way. Why not have the right?
No, absolutely. And in fact, it's interesting that you mentioned that those tools are available. I used to work in a consulting firm which used to conduct assessment centers for private sector leaders to understand who all have various leadership potential. So, those are some reforms which could be incorporated, given the, obviously adjusting them to the scale and the cost and volumes, etc. And also, what you said about my thesis at Cornell, let me just bring that up, was about performance management of the Indian administrative services. And I was surprised to find out what you just said, was that there is no clear linkage between the performance of a civil servant to the kind of future roles that you are training them for. So the training and development system and the performance management system, they are not working in tandem as they should for the Indian administrative services. And that's probably one thing that UPSC should be looking at. So I'd let you comment on that, and then we'll move to the second question.
I agree with you today, because I also did a short stint at Berkeley, and I was engaging with people there to understand whether such tools exist. And I was convinced such tools exist. Now, I don't think cost is an issue, because imagine you select a person who's not equipped to be leader. He's brilliantly brilliant, and he becomes Secretary Government of India. The guy will not be able to carry the team with him. I have seen a large number of secretaries sitting till 9 o'clock in the night and doing work. I left the office 6 o'clock, except the first 2 months in my 4 years as assistant as secretary. I was never in the office after 6 o'clock. And why should I sit in the office after 6 o'clock? I had brilliant people working with me. I give them that space, that protection, that support, that trust, and they did it. They were happy. I was happy. Now that's the problem. Here, when I spoke to my colleagues, most of them had this observation to make. Yaar, mere saath to koi kaam hi nahi karta, sab mujhe karna padta hai. That's where the problem is. The guy is brilliant. He thinks no end of himself. He thinks that only he can do the job. And that's absolutely the opposite of leadership. So that's the problem. You have absolutely brilliant people. I tell you, individually, you can't match them. But that's not the purpose for which you are there. You got to get things done. You got to get the work done. Don't have to do it yourself. That's the problem with service.
No, absolutely. And, let me just segue into my second question. And that's related again to what you said about the relationship between the politician and the civil servant. About this, Sahib culture, or the culture of the politician being the master of the civil servant. And what I feel, and what you've also mentioned in the book, it's not just in this relationship between the politician and the civil servant. It tends to be our national culture in many respects. I remember in your book you talk about one incident where you and another civil servant friend of yours funnily enter a movie theater, and they are not starting the movie because they're waiting for two civil servants to join the show, and those turn out to be you, and somebody told them that there are these two IAS officers coming in. So, and that similar sort of a Sahib culture is replicated then between an ordinary citizen and the civil servant. And not only in this context of the Neta, the civil servant, and the ordinary citizens, even in the corporates in India, that sort of a Sahib culture that exists. It has, it has a lot of repercussions. It also comes with this culture of being in a club, because all the sahibs, they tend to protect the other sahibs. And again, if I talk about my thesis, I remember that a lot of civil servants, they told me that when you're assessing the performance of a civil servant, it's considered a taboo to give somebody a subpar score, even if they've performed below the expectations of the superior, because then their superiors would be giving calls to them and singling them out. So I want to hear about your views on this sort of a hierarchical Sahib culture, as well as this club culture that exists in tandem with that, and what can we do about that as
First of all,
the youth of a nation?
I think we all belong to a feudal system, and we haven't really got out of it. So that feudal mentality is not merely in the bureaucracy; it's through the society. And bureaucracy is just a manifestation of that feudal culture that we have. The second part, I don't totally agree with you, because an article will appear next week, which I'm writing on the absence of ethos in the IS. There's no ethos. There's absolutely no. I wish there were. Because if there is ethos, there would be certain principles, certain positives that you start learning from each other. It is not there, unfortunately. So this whole concept of IS officer saving another IS officer does not exist. I've seen it from inside. If need be, they will dig each other's grave. And that's what is happening. That if there were ethos, they will do that. It was there in the 50s because British believed that. Thereafter, it dissipated. Everyone is fighting his own individual battle. And I can say that for sure. So I don't think that's correct. Now, how do we address it? We address it by, one, as I started by saying in the previous answer to the previous question, select people who are leaders. They will understand the importance of working in a group rather than as an individual. They understand the importance of individual brilliance, all right, which they are, but in group brilliance. Mm-hmm. They will understand the importance of evolving an ethos, where a new person who joins the service gets absorbed in that ethos rather than creates his own. And he lives his own ivory tower. So this needs to be done, can be done, actually. And this is very important. The reason is very simple, that an IS officer, most of them occupy such critical positions that if you don't do that to them, they will destroy them. It's much easier to destroy. Building is very difficult. And when they build, then they will build this as a part of a system, not as an individual. That's the second point. Because if you evolve a system, then it will sustain over a period of time. When an individual is only the person behind it, then the moment he goes, the whole thing will collapse. So I'll give you an example. So for example, when I was school secretary, I was very particular about creating a system so that I become redundant. Mm-hmm. That was my objective in each assignment, that I want to become a redundant system takeover. I could do that because to begin with, as school secretary, I spent nights in the office. At the end of 2 years, I had only 45 minutes of work. And I'm glad to say, 5 years down the line, today, the systems that we created are being used for coal block auction even now. So you got to create those systems. It's not individual. You may end up getting a lot of credit for it. But fact of the matter is, the real test of what you create is when you're not there. So for example, this health insurance scheme. RSPY. Right. I tried hard, couldn't create that institution. But the idea was so strong that the current government, after struggling for 3 years, picked up the same idea, gave it a different Swarup, and it became Ayushman Bharat. But what I have always believed, that we must have people who are able to create institutions and systems and themselves become redundant. That's very important. Again, that can be done. I mean, there's a chapter in my book which looks at this aspect of creation of institutions.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We'd like to continue this conversation forward, but then before we open out to the audience, I know that you're running short on time. So if I may request you to say a few words about our fellowship and officially announce the second cohort, which is coming up, the second round of the fellowship. Our applications are open now. And if you could just share a few thoughts about what the confluence of policy, diplomacy, and sustainability mean to you. And after that, we'll launch our fellowship video.
I'm so glad that you are doing this work of global policy, diplomacy, and sustainability, and you're giving fellowship for it, because all three are extremely important. Policies are critical, though it provides a direction on what happens. Of course, diplomacy in the international context is the key these days. Actually, the manner in which countries are negotiating with each other, they're interacting with each other, is totally dependent on the diplomacy of that particular country. And finally, and most importantly, sustainable. If any policy or any diplomatic overture is not sustainable, it's not worth its salt. We talked about sustainability earlier. We may create a splash here and splash there. That doesn't work. So for that, sustainability becomes very important. I'm so glad that you are looking at this aspect of sustainability in the context of policy, in the context of diplomacy. Congratulations to you. And I'm glad you're giving fellowship. I'm not young enough to be a part of that fellowship. Probably you won't give me one, but I would have loved to be there if I could. But in any case, if there is any occasion for me to interact with your fellows who are there, I would love to be around. Thank you, and compliments to you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much, sir. And with this, we'll launch the fellowship video. Aditi, if I may request you to start the video, please.
Oh, I'll just play it.
Thank you so much. And with this, we are open to questions and answers. So please raise your hand if you have a question. We'll unmute you and then you can ask away. All right. Anybody with a question?
I think, so I got direct message from Akanksha Sharma. Okay. I'll just read out her message first, sir. 1 second. Yes, so Akanksha Sharma is asking, how difficult is it to manage so many different fields as a civil service servant? So you yourself have been at the helm of the coal ministry, the education ministry, labor, all of these things. And that almost requires you to be an expert in each of these fields because you're heading that ministry. So her question is, what should one do as a civil servant to do justice to wearing so many hats and juggling so many roles?
First of all, let me clarify, you don't have to be an expert. In fact, it will be troublesome if you are an expert because there are experts already around. You don't have to be an expert. And I have always held this view that this whole business of specialist versus generalist is nonsense. A civil servant, especially an IAS officer, has to be expert at managing men and women. You should be a good judge of men and women. You should be able to trust those men and women. You should be able to delegate them. You should be able to give them space. You should be able to protect them. You should be able to guide them. And you should be able to manage the environment around them, which they can't manage. If you can do that, you would succeed. The moment you start getting into the expertise of it, you are in trouble. Like, for example, the Prime Minister thinks that I'm a great technology expert, which I'm not. I can barely operate my laptop. But he thinks so because probably amongst the civil servant, I must have used technology to the hilt everywhere. And it's there in my book as well. I've demonstrated, and I'm convinced that a lot of good can be done through use of technology. I knew how to use the technology. I didn't know the technology itself. So this difference has to be understood very clearly. So you can give me any hat, because ultimately that hat means to me managing men and women. Get the right person for the right job and leave him alone. Don't your nose every day. Let him feel comfortable. But your job is in assessing people. Your job is in motivating people. Your job is to get them moving. You don't have to move yourself. Once you understand these fundamental principles, at least in the IS, you'll succeed. The basic knowledge you will acquire, because you can't get into the IS because without that level of IQ. That is good enough for you. You don't have to understand the C++ or the language in which computer is written, which program is being used. You should know how that program can be used. That's important. So that's the value that you bring in. You are not getting into their domain. You define their domain. You define your domain. Become a facilitator rather than a regulator.
I think Akanksha here would really appreciate it, because sometimes because of the way the term administration has been defined in the Indian context, you think that I have to administer everything and I have to be a know-it-all. But ultimately, it's the dictionary definition of the term administration, where you were just managing and administering, and that's about it. Arpit, I have another question. If I'm getting too greedy, you can tell me to stop. But
no, sure. We have about 7 minutes to go.
Okay, so again, congratulations on the book. I already wrote to you specifically saying how wonderful the book is. But one of the questions, and probably it gets into the whole concept of Aristotle's concept of good and bad and such things. But I think the central theme of the book is how to become a good civil servant, and then it explores various fields of what is good. But as if you take it to be a very Hobbesian view of things, that every man is selfish and every man is bad. If I am getting short-term advantage by being dishonest, how do you handhold a civil servant and tell him that there's actually benefit for you if you do good? And how do you explain to him the advantages of doing good and being honest and being efficient at the same time, as your book explains?
First of all, I don't define what is good in the book. I don't even say what I did was right. What I say in the book is, this is what I did. This is what I thought was right. And my advice to civil servants is, define for yourself what you think is good. What I can do to you is place before you certain examples of people who thought they did good and succeeded. That's it. Beyond it, I can't educate anybody else. I have no intention to do that either. The book demonstrates and illustrates that good work pays. There is a chapter called Honesty Pays. Because I'm trying not merely to give a theoretical formulation like Aristotle to him. No. I'm saying here are officers who acted in a particular manner. Yes, on some occasions they suffered, but by and large they succeeded. No, the choice is yours. You can look at officers, honest officers who failed. There are a number of IS officers who feel frustrated and failed. So I'm throwing the ball in the court of the concerned subject. And I'm saying is your call. However, let it be your call. Let it not be your Padosi's call. Let me exemplify this. This is not there in my book. Probably write subsequently. Most of the things that we do is for our Padosi. So I have still not understood why do people buy Mercedes car. Because why should I spend another 70 lakhs of rupees ahead of my Bolino to buy a car which I will never drive if my driver will drive? And if I close my eyes and sit in it, it is no different from any other car. If that be the case, why am I buying Mercedes car? I am buying Mercedes car for my Padosi to see that I have a Mercedes. Now, if you expand this example to other things, I think whenever we start doing things for others, we are in trouble. So my appeal to an officer is, please look inward and see what you need. If you need it, take it. But if you're doing it for your Padosi, then there's a problem. So you have to take a call yourself and then suffer the consequences of it, either being dishonest or honest. I mean, there are 2 chief secretaries of UP, former chief secretaries, who went behind the bars. So he has to understand that dishonesty can lead to that also. And honesty can lead to people who've done so well, like Mr. Yogen Narayan, Mr. B.K. Devan. There are so many officers who've done brilliantly. So the choice is this. So I'm not telling him anything. Like typical Plato, not Aristotle, I'm merely turning his head towards the light. Whether he wants to see it, whether he doesn't want to see it, is his choice. I can't.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that answer, sir. And thank you for an answer with a practical, you have exemplified some really practical examples of people who have done this and who have survived the system. And related to that, we have Priya Sharma asking over here is, as an IAS officer, was there any moment in your life where you stopped believing in the system?
No, I may appear to be a very confident, positive man. I never lost faith in the system, but I was depressed on a number of occasions. In fact, these lines, which I'm now going to mention to you, were an outpouring at a point when I was so depressed. And it's there in my book, though these lines have not been quoted. संशय नहीं मन में तेरी सृष्टि में अर्थ तू ही तू मेरे मन में समाया सब कुछ मैंने तुझसे है पाया फिर भी स्तब्ध हूं व्याकुल हूं अशांत शायद अनजान क्या यही जीवन है जो पापी है दुराचारी है क्यों जीत रहा निरंतर स्पष्ट करो अभिव्यक्त करो कुछ तो करो मेरे राम तो ये मेरी वेदना थी जो मैंने राम की जिंदगी में डाल दी at a particular point in time in my service I was very depressed so there have been occasions. But if you're an optimist, it comes back, and this is there in my book. These lines are there in my book. It says, समय रुका नहीं, हम क्यों ठहर गए? अभी तो हम चले भी नहीं, फिर क्यों थक गए? उठो पथिक, मत भ्रमित हो, धूमिल अंधियारे में, श्रेष्ठ वही जो घिरा नहीं हो, क्षणिक निराशा में. जागो, जगाओ, मन मत बहलाओ, एक मसीहा तुम भी बन जाओ. I feel inspired by these lines in the book. So it's a question. There is no. There's no single dimension to your existence. There would be multiple dimensions. There would be situations where you feel depressed. That's the real challenge in an individual. If you can come out of it, you'll succeed in life.
Thank you so much. And on that note, we'll call it a day. For those who have joined us from abroad, I see Moritz over here and who could not understand the translation of these lines. You'll have to take a look at the book and figure that out. But
in the book, there is a translation given to both sides. It's translated in the book. You read the book. Yeah.
Absolutely. But thank you so much, sir, for taking out the time. As always, a pleasure speaking to you. And thank you for spending this hour in the new year with us.
Thank you. Bye. God bless you.
Thank you so much.
Take care.
Bye-bye. And with that, we come to an end of our today's discussion, our fireside chat with Mr. Anil Swarup. Thank you so much, everybody who have joined us from different parts of the world and different parts of the country. For people who have joined us on Facebook online, do check out our fellowship. Our applications are open, and the early bird deadline is tomorrow. We also have another late application deadline on the 17th. So we'll be looking forward to engaging with you, and we are looking forward to interacting with you as fellows of the GPODS Fellowship. Thank you so much and have a good evening. Bye-bye. And a good day, depending on where you are.